Good evening. We begin with breaking news. The U.S. Senate has acquitted former President Donald Trump on the impeachment charge of inciting last month's deadly siege at the Capitol and siding with the mob that attacked the heart of American democracy in his name. The verdict, 57-43, short of the two-thirds majority needed to convict. 7 Republicans sided with all Democrats and 2 independents to vote guilty.
Washington is on fire today, politically, constitutionally, emotionally. In a scenario few Republicans ever believed possible, the United States Senate has just delivered the vote Donald Trump spent years insisting could never happen. Capitol Hill is reportedly erupting into chaos after an explosive Senate showdown leaves Trump suddenly facing the unthinkable, removal driven not by Democrats alone, but by fractures spreading inside his own political coalition. Behind closed doors, panic is spreading because once loyalty begins collapsing, power often follows faster than anyone expects.
Incoming Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer is calling for the immediate removal of President Trump from office. The president is accused of inciting violence and egging on his supporters who stormed the U.S. Capitol building yesterday. Now, Senator Schumer wants President Trump out of the White House, either by invoking the 25th Amendment or by Congress reconvening to impeach him again.
History teaches us something uncomfortable. Political systems rarely break from one dramatic moment. They break when pressure builds quietly for too long, until people protecting power suddenly decide protecting themselves matters more. If this moment unsettles you, subscribe, stay with me, and tell me honestly, are we witnessing political accountability or total chaos? The moment itself felt almost impossible to imagine until suddenly it was no longer hypothetical. The Senate chamber fell into a silence so heavy that even longtime Capitol staff reportedly described the atmosphere as surreal. Hours of closed-door negotiations, emergency caucus meetings, furious private arguments inside Republican offices. And then, finally, the vote that Washington had spent weeks whispering about behind closed doors became public. Not close, not symbolic, a genuine political earthquake. Because in this scenario, the impossible number had finally been reached. Enough Republican senators crossed the line. Enough pressure broke through. And Donald Trump, the most politically dominant Republican figure of the modern era, suddenly found himself staring at something no American president had ever fully experienced before. A bipartisan Senate vote effectively ended his hold on power. Now, to understand why this would shake Washington so violently, you have to understand what the Senate actually represents inside American politics. This is not cable television outrage. This is not social media warfare. The Senate is an institutional power, slow-moving power, careful power. The place where dramatic political emotion usually goes to die, which is precisely why a vote like this would feel so destabilizing. Because senators do not risk detonating their own political careers unless they believe the alternative has become even more dangerous.
One Senate Democrat says he's still not sure how he'll vote at President Trump's impeachment trial. West Virginia's Joe Manchin does say the president should at least be censured by the Senate. Well, today senators heard closing arguments in the case.
The Senate can still do the right thing.
What are the odds, if left in office, that he will continue trying to cheat? I will tell you, 100%.
Political loyalty inside Congress is remarkably durable until survival enters the equation. When lawmakers begin fearing voters, legal consequences, or institutional collapse more than party retaliation, previously impossible outcomes suddenly become realistic. That shift, according to reports surrounding the crisis, had reportedly been building quietly for weeks. Legal pressure intensified, federal investigations expanded, courtroom developments worsened, and behind closed doors, Republican senators reportedly began confronting an increasingly brutal question. What happens if standing beside Trump becomes politically fatal? For years, Republican lawmakers calculated that opposing him meant career destruction, primary challengers, public humiliation, political exile. Trump's influence over the Republican base made loyalty feel almost mandatory, but pressure changes calculations, especially when suburban voters begin pulling away. Independent voters begin panicking. Major donors begin making uncomfortable phone calls. And suddenly, senators stop asking, "Will Trump punish me?" They begin asking, "Will voters punish me if I stay?" That psychological shift matters more than almost anything else in Washington, because political coalitions rarely collapse dramatically at first. They weaken quietly. One senator grows uncomfortable. Another privately changes position. A third stops defending publicly. Then one morning, momentum changes, and suddenly everyone realizes the center of gravity inside the room has moved. Capitol Hill runs on perception. The moment senators begin believing power is shifting away from a leader, loyalty often erodes far faster than the public expects. Political gravity changes quickly once fear changes direction. And today, in this imagined constitutional collision, fear may have changed direction all at once. The real chaos did not begin on the Senate floor. It began behind closed doors, inside Republican offices, private phone calls, emergency strategy sessions, conversations nobody wanted leaked. Because according to insiders familiar with moments like this, the most dangerous political crises are never the loudest ones at first. They begin quietly, with fear. And the fear spreading through Trump's political orbit tonight would not simply be about one Senate vote, it would be about what comes next. Because once senators cross a line like this, once members of a president's own party publicly turn against him, something deeper begins happening inside Washington. The illusion of invincibility starts cracking. For years, Donald Trump's greatest political weapon was not merely popularity, it was inevitable. Republicans believed he could survive anything. Investigations, indictments, court battles, scandals, public outrage. Every political storm somehow seemed to strengthen him. That perception shaped behavior. Lawmakers stayed loyal because loyalty felt safer than resistance. But imagine what happens when that calculation suddenly reverses. Imagine what happens when Republican senators begin seeing internal polling collapse, when donors begin threatening to walk away, when swing state Republicans realize defending Trump may now cost them re-election. That is when survival instinct begins overpowering ideology. And survival instinct is the strongest political force in Washington. Political systems rarely transform because people suddenly become courageous. More often, they change because self-preservation changes direction. The same lawmakers who defended power yesterday may abandon it tomorrow if they believe the cost of loyalty has become too high. That dynamic reportedly exploded after weeks of mounting pressure. Legal concerns deepened. Congressional divisions worsened. Public frustration intensified. And perhaps most importantly, Republican lawmakers reportedly began confronting something they had feared privately for years. What if Trump himself had become a political liability, not the solution, the liability? That realization would explain why Capitol Hill reportedly descended into such extraordinary tension. Public protests are swelling outside, demonstrators screaming through barricades, cable news cameras flooding every corner of the Capitol, staff members openly describing panic. And behind it all, one brutal political question spreading quietly through Republican leadership. Can the party survive if Trump stays, or does it collapse if he goes? Because once a political movement becomes built around one person, removing that person creates enormous risk. The base feels betrayed, donors hesitate, alliances fracture, and no one knows who controls the future afterward, which makes this imagined showdown feel so explosive. Not because Washington has never seen scandal before. Washington survives scandal constantly. But because this would represent something much more dangerous, a rupture inside Trump's own coalition. The moment political loyalty becomes conditional, leaders enter dangerous territory. Once allies begin asking whether protecting themselves matters more than protecting the movement, power starts weakening far faster than anyone anticipates. And tonight, across Capitol Hill, Republicans may be discovering exactly how quickly that unraveling can begin. And then comes the question nobody inside Trump's movement would be emotionally prepared to answer. What happens the morning after? Because a Senate rupture of this magnitude would not end the crisis. It would begin a completely different one. Washington would wake up to a political reality that suddenly feels unrecognizable. Donald Trump, the man who spent nearly a decade dominating Republican politics through sheer force of personality, would no longer sit at the unquestioned center of gravity. And once that vacuum appears, power moves quickly, very quickly. Republican governors would begin recalculating. Potential presidential contenders would quietly reposition themselves. Party donors would start making private calls, asking the same brutal question, who comes next? Because politics does not tolerate empty space for long. And nothing terrifies political institutions more than uncertainty. For years, the Republican Party revolved around Trump's instincts, Trump's grievances, Trump's political energy. Even those who privately disagreed often stayed silent because the cost of resistance felt too high. But what happens when resistance suddenly looks survivable? What happens when senators who once feared retaliation begin discovering that the political sky did not actually fall? That possibility alone could trigger a chain reaction nobody fully controls. One of the least understood truths about political movements is how quickly power can migrate after a symbolic defeat. Once supporters begin sensing vulnerability, loyalty often becomes negotiable and political alliances start moving with astonishing speed. And then comes the legal dimension. Because in this imagined scenario, removal would not simply represent political humiliation. It could transform Trump's legal position overnight. The protections attached to presidential power begin weakening. The political leverage changes. Investigations that once moved cautiously may suddenly feel less constrained. Opponents who hesitated may become far more aggressive. And that reality could trigger panic not only around Trump himself, but across his broader political network. Advisors, allies, former officials, anyone whose political future became deeply tied to his survival. Because Washington insiders understand something uncomfortable. When power weakens, people start protecting themselves, quietly, carefully, sometimes ruthlessly. Private testimony changes, cooperation increases, distance grows. The same people who once promised unconditional loyalty suddenly begin speaking in much more careful language. Not betrayal exactly, self-preservation, and Washington runs on self-preservation. Political institutions are built to absorb crises, but individuals inside those institutions respond differently. The moment uncertainty arrives, survival instinct becomes dominant, and survival instinct has ended many powerful careers throughout history. Which leaves America facing a larger question than Donald Trump himself. Because if a Senate confrontation like this ever truly happened, the consequences would extend far beyond one presidency. It would force the country to confront something deeply uncomfortable. Are America's institutions still strong enough to restrain political power, or has politics become so tribal that constitutional limits only matter when people choose to accept them? And tonight, in this extraordinary imagined collision, Washington may be staring directly at that answer. So tonight, the real question hanging over Washington is not simply whether Donald Trump could survive another political crisis. It is whether the Republican Party and America's constitutional system could survive the shockwave that follows. Maybe this imagined Senate confrontation never happens. Maybe loyalty holds. Or maybe the pressure building beneath the surface is already stronger than most people realize. Because history has a habit of changing suddenly right after everyone becomes convinced change is impossible. Tell me honestly, would removing Trump save the country or tear it apart even further? Like, subscribe, and stay close because Washington's next political earthquake may arrive faster than anyone expects.